I used to have this really elaborate it was a quarterly review personally that was like all these questions that I asked myself, and really what it came from was identifying things that make you happy and how are you doing on living like a wholehearted life. So it was really elaborate, and I did it for a couple years, and it really serviced me well, and then it stopped servicing me. Like I had the reps in, and so now once a trimester, I block off time during like the appropriate no meeting week, and I ask myself a couple of questions. All right. What are the 3 things I want more of in life? All right, write those down. What are the 3 things I want less of in life? Write those down. What is the 3 for me? The more of and less of actually usually are tied together, because if I want more of something, I need less than something else.
Right, got to make room.
Yeah, and so then it's what are the 3 projects that are going to move towards that goal, and what's the first next action to get that going?
Welcome to the Culture Goodr podcast with Stephen Leese and Shaun Tinney. This podcast is a behind the shades look at creating and changing culture inside of Goodr sunglasses. You can live with the status quo, you can challenge the status quo, or you can do what we do at Goodr and status the quo challenge.
Welcome to Culture Goodr. Today we're going to talk about a shift we made from the quarter system to trimesters this year. Let's talk about the origin story and get into how it's going.
Yeah, for sure. From starting 17, 18, we were really diligent about being on the quarter system. And so we had a Goodr stock once a quarter. That's our employee summit. We had AMP, which is our review system. So quarterly reviews for everybody. This meeting called PDA, which is how we present and align on things. So every quarter like clockwork. And we had, from 2018 to 2021, we had 40 TWCs. And really, I'm a big believer in you need to rep things out to start out with. And as we're a young company and as we're learning this stuff, we changed AMP constantly, right? In like the first couple of years, every quarter, it was we tweak it now, but it was rapid iterations. And last summer, within about a month of each other, I sat through like 20 AMPs. So all the flock leaders and flock stars. It was dialed. Nobody was getting blindsided. Like feedback had been given clearly in between. I'm like, this is incredible. And then I was at a PDA, our quarterly present, debate, align meeting. And everybody showed up and really presented well. But also this thing used to happen where, man, there used to be a lot of tension in those meetings because we started them to create more cohesion. And so people were getting blindsided. But what I realized in that moment was, the problem got solved. Like we are talking to each other. Like everybody knows what's going on. And that was the first moment where I started working with Hannah to be like, hey, we should move from the quarter system to the trimester system. And it was simply because I saw all these things we put in place work. People are living at a high level. And so I was like, hey, how do we tweak this, give people more time and just relook at how we do everything? And so we made that decision the end of last year, and starting in 2023, we moved from quarters to trimesters. Yeah.
So at each point, you felt there was a gap in communication or a gap in checkpoints. You're like, okay, we need to insert something here. And then as soon as you realize, this is no longer needed, we can start thinking about pulling it out. And that gave you the idea to just do a wholesale reset. Yeah,
exactly. And it was TWC. Like I said, we did 40 from like 2018 to 2021, pandemic. But then 2022, we moved it to 32. And this year we're moving it to 24, right? We've gotten really good at it. We're concise. We're delivering the information. So let's make it really impactful, simple yet significant.
Yeah.
But it does, yeah. So, but that's the good thing. But it takes a lot of reps to get there.
Yeah, for sure. As I'm thinking back, TWC initially was like an individual status report, right? Yeah. I'd say, hey, this is what I'm up to this week. This is something I learned, and we go through the whole company, which was doable at a smaller size, but obviously we couldn't do that now.
Yeah. And so all these things that we talk about, we evolve over time, and really, it also came from this place of we've identified this problem for a while that we need more like mental space here at Goodr, because we are such a productive company. Like everybody here is on their shit. They're driven. They're working really, really hard. And we're like goldfish. We'll fill the bowl that we're allowed to.
Yeah.
And part of this was, how can I, as a leader, wave a magic wand and intentionally create a bunch of space for this company? And so in moving from trimesters, just so our audience understands, every quarter we used to have performance reviews. Every quarter we would have a summit, and all of these things. So when I took a look at 2023 and I worked with Hannah on this, said, all right, if the things that we do a quarter, we do a trimester, that takes out 25% of those. Financials happens on the quarter because it has to by law. So that's not there, but everything else is trimesters. So I started pulling that out, then realized okay, our staff meeting, what happens on Tuesdays, we shouldn't be doing that if the Monday's a holiday, right? That's a grind for anybody. And so we looked at all right, well then every trimester, let's move it to 8 of them. So we start pulling out more days. We, in the past couple of years, had a no meeting week, July 4th week, and the week between Christmas and New Year's. And so all right, could we insert 2 more of those? We inserted 2 more no meeting weeks, one in March, one in October. So nobody here can have a meeting. So it's time to get some really deep work done.
Yeah.
And then, pulled out a bunch of days and then added a few back in. We added a thing called game day, which is high level presentations. And all said and done though, pulled out 29 days worth of committed activities from the calendar.
Essentially a month. Well, more than, because business days. Right?
Yeah, business days. Yeah. And so it was, it's going well. There's we got to navigate the waters, but yeah, I think it's worked out nicely.
Yeah, it totally has. And you can't get here without those reps to make the changes early and often. And then once things are solidified a bit, you can go, okay, well, that's working. We can pull that back. We can trust ourselves because we built accountability into the system.
Yeah, and I think 2 stories here. One, I do this thing all the time where I basically will ask everybody in this company just to carry. I'll give you 2 50-pound boulders and ask you to carry them up a mountain. And then halfway up, I'll come up and I'll be like, oh no, Shaun, I'll take one of those. And you're like, Steven's a really nice guy. He took one of my boulders. And I'm like,
way later.
No, Steven's a fucking prick. He gave you those 2 boulders to begin with. And this is another version of that. All right, people got their reps in. Great. Let's remove it to create the space.
Yeah.
That's very, very real. I think the other thing is being very mindful that some of this stuff matters. The leaders have a higher amount of time in on a lot of these things. They have to give reviews to their entire team. Right. They presenting at PDA. And so also, we in there, which was trying to solve for how do we free up their bandwidth so that they can be better leaders to their team.
Also scalability thing in there too. Yeah.
Yep. Scalability thing. And then the thing that I don't know how deep we want to go into this, but goodr is basically an elaborate set of systems. And so what I mean by that, we now have trimesterly reviews. Now you have a one-on-one once a month with your flock leader, and there's a format, and you're getting feedback, and everybody has 3 focuses for every trimester.
Yeah.
But that folds up into their team's vision for the year.
Yeah.
But, I know I just said a lot there, but I want everybody to just imagine this. All right, you're an individual contributor. Every trimester, you're like, all right, these are the 3 most important things that speak to our team's goal. I talk with my flock leader once a month and get evaluated on it. So I know where my focus should be going. That's another reason why we can move from 4 reviews a year to 3, because we set up these elaborate systems with checkpoints to actually help people through.
Because you not only know where it's going, you know how it's going.
Yeah. And I like to think of goodr as controlled chaos. Really.
Very much so, huh?
Yeah. Here's the bumpers. Here's what you need to be doing, and then enjoy.
Yeah. Well, as you were building those systems, I was looking through, okay, yes, individual contributor to team to, well, we have flocks and herds, right? So team to your department, essentially, department to the company overall. And at all of those points, we've established a clear process, literally fill in the blanks for what do these vision points look like? What are the projects associated? Who's on them? Deadlines all the way down to, okay, plug that into Asana and assign it to someone. Yeah. So those systems are there. That is the way we control the chaos. Even though we're constantly throwing stuff into the system, it's there as the backdrop for it all.
Yeah. And the really important thing for people to understand is everybody should know what's going on so that you should be working on that. Also, you can raise your hand and be like, hey, I said I was going to get this done. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen. And we create the space to, if you proactively negotiate any deadline, you're good here.
Yeah.
And so it also is teaching people to have better vision, also to raise their hand and ask for help.
The cue there is good news is time and options, bad news, no time, no options, right? As long as we can do something about it, we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a positive thing to be able to raise your hand and ask for help.
Yeah. And, if you're a leader at a company, you run a team, you should constantly be looking at your systems. Like, all right, is this serving what we originally intended it to? And feel free to pull the plug on something if it's not.
Yeah, right. Man, that's a hard one, right? Because we get so into, the phrase is like, that's how we do things here, right?
Yeah.
That's probably, everyone's heard that. And then it takes someone to ask, well, why though? Is it doing the job? Is it still working? Building in a way to evaluate those systems just seems like common sense, but maybe not that common.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think also people get attached to meetings. They get attached to the value that is,
right.
I show up and they see that I'm working. I think there's a lot of,
I
think there's a lot of that. We, during our no meeting week, we really encourage everybody to do calendar audits and like remove every meeting that you don't need.
Yeah.
And a couple of years ago, we wiped every meeting off the board and started over from scratch.
So it was like major spike in anxiety. No meetings. We got to build them all back in. Okay, cool.
But the whole idea of doing that is that you should be asking yourself, all right, are we having this meeting just because, or is it actually serving a purpose?
Yeah.
Is this a Loom or is this a meeting?
Right.
Is this a Slack? Like what's the purpose of this? And so this is all in service of that, of understanding why we're doing things and not just filling the time, because we have a lot of fun, creative, deep thinking work we should be doing. Let's force ourselves to do it.
Yeah, for sure. So let's look into that for a minute. The calendar audit is probably appealing to anyone.
Yeah.
How do you approach that? We have different purposes for different kinds of meetings to decide all that sort of thing. So when you're looking at your calendar, what do you see?
For sure. I do. So for me personally, one of our no meeting weeks is between Christmas and New Year's. And I delete everything off for the next year. And then like mind dump, what do I really need?
Yep.
And so that's a yearly one that I have. That's a big one.
So that's full wholesale reset.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm the CEO, so I can do that.
Yeah.
But also I think lead by example, because then other leaders come to me that have meetings with me, they understand the purpose of this.
Yep.
But essentially, so what I do is I sit down and during my weekly review, I'm always looking in the future, but I carve out a special amount of time to do it during the no meeting week. But I'm just looking at, I just start looking at and walking through, and there's a handful of things that I know I want. I do a one-on-one with the Flock Stars every single month. Yeah. And that is a really beneficial one. So I go through, but then what I'll start doing is I'll start circling them and when I say circle, I'm circling them in my mind. I'm actually just typing them in Slack.
Sure.
and saying, I'm going to cancel this meeting. I'm going to not show up to this meeting unless somebody gives me a really compelling reason. Why not? So that's kind of how I do it. And then the one thing that I do constantly now is, and Tatiana, who runs my calendar, every Tuesday and Thursday, I have 60 minutes to 120 minutes time blocked off called space. And it can only get filled within 7 days. Right. So that is inserting space into my calendar so that I can have stuff in more real time.
It's like a 15-minute parking spot in a mall.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. But I think the hard question is, if anybody was to do it for the first time, I would actually say you should delete everything. And then you should say all right, I will resurface the ones as they are needed.
Yeah. How's it get added back to the team?
Yeah.
It's got to be useful, serve a clear purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Is there anything where you have looked at a meeting and gone, I'm just not sure that we need this ever again?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I can't even, I'm trying to think some off the top of my head. That happens more than you think.
Yeah.
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 More than you think. Also, meetings that I maybe was on once a week, I'll be like, hey, I'll come the last Tuesday of the month. So if you have something for me, I will look at it then. And so I do a lot of that, of all right, I don't need to be here. I don't need to do this every week. I can do this once a month.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, the leadership, I'm meeting with all the Flock Stars once every other week. And that we intentionally keep on the calendar so that, all right, new hires coming up and we want to talk about people's role pitches. And that is that's more that's actually space blocked for us to do things. And for example, the one tomorrow on Thursday, it got canceled because a couple of out of town and there was nothing on the agenda. So just pull the ripcord.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So when you're doing your weekly review, I think I'm curious, just how far ahead are you looking and what are you looking at each of those kind of windows of time?
Yeah. I have my weekly review checklist in a Google Sheet just because that's what I do. I redo it every year. So imagine down the first column is a bunch of things, just different breaks. There's the stuff I want. There's different things of looking at my calendar, making sure my workouts are set up for the week, all right, my partner Sarah, what are our date nights for this month? Mm-hmm. And then when I get into this, there's a block about all of our trimester events. So there's a line item for AMP, AMP, then TWC, then goodr stock. And so I have 52 columns because it's for a year. And I go in there and I say like, all right, AMP week is this week. So I am looking 4 months into the future at a breeze, but I've pre-populated everything. So I'm like looking, saying like, oh, AMP's not for 6 weeks. I'm good. Oh, AMP's coming up in 2 weeks. I need to make sure I'm here. And so I have all of my big commitments in there and I'm looking at them every Monday, 4 months out, every single week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen, what I love about that is that you said where you start is with yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then work.
For sure.
I think that's probably not something everyone goes about doing, like creating that space for ourselves to show up at work the way we need to be healthy and present.
Oh yeah. And for me, my weekly review is a lynch point in my week and my life. And so for example, all right, I'm doing, so from January through May, we just finished 50K training.
Yep.
And in there, right at the top, I have a note of like, all right, confirm that where we're running on Saturday, send a note out to the team. And those things, that's an easy thing that I could skip over. Yeah. Right? Because I'm busy, air quotes for people. Sure. But yeah, so the key is, all right, what's the stuff that matters to me personally the most that I'm most likely to, avoid and do those at the top so you get them done.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also the 2-minute rule, right? If it takes you 2 minutes or less, just do it now.
Yeah.
Do you have a block of time for things like that?
My weekly review is a weekly review / working session. Like a typically weekly review should be under an hour. I have 4 hours because I time block. So I build out all my agendas for the week. I look at, all right, who do I have one-on-ones with? I'm going in there. I'm building out the agenda for every meeting that I'm running that week. And so I'm doing that thing of it. And then there's a huge amount of time built in where I'm crossing off dozens of next actions.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I got a trip coming up. I need to book a flight for Denver. I'm just putting that to-do list to show up on Monday in my weekly review section. Because I know that I have time blocked off there where I'm jacked up on coffee, right? I got mainlining iced coffee. So
it's just going to meet you while you're ready for it.
Yeah, I'm blowing through those. And nothing infringes on my weekly review.
Yeah. Awesome.
Good luck getting in there.
Yeah, right. So I think that's a fantastic way to ensure that you as an individual contributor, especially a super important one to this company, can show up dialed the way you need to. Now, looking at the way that we have structured our time as a company, right? We just made this big shift from 4 to 3.
Yeah.
I used to call the quarter the flamingo year because everything that was going to happen to you happened in that time. And so in order to do that, we also had to shift the way that we were looking at planning as a company, right? Vision 321 also came into play at this point, and then kind of filtered down into systems that get all the way down to the individual contributor. So just talk a little bit about how we arrived at that particular kind of 3-2-1 approach and how that has helped us grow.
Yeah. It started in 2020. I realized that I have a certain ownership as a leader to be communicating out, here's our focus. And 2020 was actually a 1, 2, and 5 year. And so here's what we're focusing on. And I committed to, in Q1 of every year, sharing this out. So in 2021, as started doing it, I realized 5 years is laughable because and so realized like it's a 3-year plan. Years 1, 2, and 3, and that's when I first so that's when it got shared out and looked at it that way. And then that was a time I started asking like, oh, you know what? This is the company now. Every team should start filtering in. And we kind of was loosey-goosey about it until beginning of 2022, we had moved from all these teams to departments, herds. And I was like, no, now I'm not asking, I'm telling.
Yeah.
Every herd, every flock needs to have their own vision 3-2-1 that speaks up to the greater good. And then every person needs to have their own one. So they know what they're focusing on to build up, right? So it's just like a giant pyramid, essentially, or an arrow all heading in the same direction. And then we have, so that gets set up. Then TWC, which happens 8 times a trimester, there's a high level dashboard. So we're looking at revenue in real time so we can make decisions because revenue is very important.
Kind of, yep.
Then every herd has a dashboard. Hey, here's their status, right? So we're hitting that 8 times every trimester. Then AMP, what we talked about earlier, trimester reviews. Every individual person is working with their leader. They're meeting with them once a month and getting reviewed on it and evaluated once every 4 months. That goes into that giant arrow. And then, then we're creating space for goodr stock and to have like fun and celebrate. But it's all in this, we are one giant, arrow, race car, dolphin,
rocket ship.
Whatever, rocket ship, moving in the same direction.
Yeah. Oh man, you have a template for a personal review that I think would just be valuable for people to hear.
Yeah.
Can you just talk us through what that looks like?
You talking about like trimesterly questions?
3, yeah.
Well,
and then like
the threes, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so I used to have this really elaborate, it was a quarterly review personally that was like all these questions that I asked myself. And really what it came from was identifying things that make you happy and how are you doing on living like a wholehearted life. So it was really elaborate and I did it for a couple of years and it really serviced me well. And then it stopped servicing me. Like I had the reps in. And so now once a trimester, I block off time during like the appropriate no meeting week. And I ask myself a couple of questions. All right. What are the 3 things I want more of in life? All right. Write those down. What are the 3 things I want less of in life? Write those down. What is the 3, for me, the more of and less of actually usually are tied together. Because if I want more of something, I need less than something else.
Right, got to make room.
Yeah, and so then it's what are the 3 projects that are going to move towards that goal and what's the first next action to get that going?
Yeah.
And anybody that can do this, it will take you 15 minutes. I'll do it in meetings sometimes and say, all right, cool. Can anybody do one of those next actions in the next 5 minutes? Do it.
Yeah.
And you realize you're like, oh my God, I want to play more golf. Okay. Can you time block off X amount of time per week to do that?
Yep.
Do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like an instant, it just feels like, oh yeah, I am in charge of my life and I can make change happen if I want. And I think I do want these things and less of that other thing. And it's easy. There's like immediately just watching TV or whatever comes to mind. Like, yeah, I can do for sure less of that and more of anything else that's appealing.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Those get worked into my weekly review.
Yeah.
I have a section that's my 3 focuses and I have on there, what are the 3 things that I'm working on? And every week I'm looking at, am I making movement towards that?
Yeah.
Am I making progress?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's say you're not for a couple weeks in a row. How do you evaluate that situation?
So my simple weekly review is I do a red, yellow, green. Green is great, good. Yellow is maybe you did part of it. Maybe something was a little out of your control. Red's like you wanted to do it and you didn't do it. Yep. There's also a blue, which is you're saying like I'm intentionally not going to do this. But anyway, if I get 3 weeks in a row of a red, I have to ask myself, I either need to make this green immediately or I need to take it off this list because I'm not committed to doing it. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's also okay.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that speaks to staying agile, which this whole effort represents agility as a company, right?
For sure.
So if someone runs a company or runs a team, how do they approach evaluating their time in a way that is agile and can be strategically relevant to them?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. I think it's hard. In full transparency, I would want to ask numerous questions. I want to say, all right, cool. You're a leader of a team. Let's say you have a leader. You lead 10 people. I would say, all right, cool. Do you have your year mapped out with important dates for you, your company, and your team? And the answer is no. Like, well, let's start there.
Right.
And let's start there. And like, what are your things? Whether it's big projects, quarterly reviews. What are the things going on in your world? How are you tracking on those? And you need to like, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 50 minutes understanding the problem.
Yep.
I'd want to like understanding like what is your problem and then how do we reverse engineer things out of it? So if you're a micromanager and you know that's a problem with people on your team, saying, all right, give them clear goals and have, what are your checkpoints? Is it, if you're daily, then commit to going to weekly for the next 3 months. If you're weekly and you think that's too much, commit to going monthly and saying like, I expect you to show up with these things. And if they're good, and then you ask somebody on your team to hold you accountable. I know I'm struggling with micromanaging. Here's how I'm going to work on it. I want you to hold me accountable, right? Because like light is the best disinfectant.
Yeah.
And so I would start there, and there's not this like magic pill per se, but it is you start with a deep understanding of what's going on, and then hopefully you could solve for it.
Absolutely. And speaking for myself, the more absentee manager side of things, where I'm like, you got it. I trust you guys. Now, Kelly, who gave a talk the other day, brought these paint it done templates before us in the flock leader meeting. And I was like, now see, that's what I need.
Yeah.
Because in support of autonomy for the folks on my team, I need to be able to paint it done for them and say, okay, this is what we are looking for. If I have a way I think it should be done, I'm going to write that, or as you wish. And then when we're going to check in, what the expectation is for that checkpoint, right?
Yeah.
If we are living our lives in loops, it's like, okay, I got my day pretty well planned and week probably, but the months and year might need a little bit more clarity painted in so people can go their own way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, if you are doing this if you have a team and you're giving somebody expectations and painting stuff done, you need to always give a due date. And if somebody's doing it to you, you need to always ask for a due date.
Right.
That is ground rule number one. It's okay to say, I need this by the 15th. Is that okay? And somebody on the team might say, I can get it to you by the 20th. But that's how you take ambiguous asks into like really concrete things.
Yeah, for sure. Also, keeping it with Kelly, she was speaking about her experience boxing, right?
Yeah.
Each time she throws a punch, her coach catches it, and the way that he catches that punch is what she called feedback.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought that was really interesting. That kind of blew my mind, actually. It was like, oh, yeah, so each person is kind of throwing their punches, and if I'm not there, they're just shadow boxing.
Yeah.
I need to meet that punch and give some feedback and go, oh, yeah, okay, cool, good, but this direction.
Yeah.
Right?
Or harder. Or
Right, exactly.
No, for sure. I think the wild thing here is the highest performers at goodr seek out time with me the most.
What are they asking for in that time?
I mean, so Kelly's perfect example. Hey, insert a thing. I'm working on this talk. Walk you through it. Get your thoughts.
Yeah.
That's great. Maybe try this. Awesome. Hey, my team's doing all this cool stuff. Anything else you want to see? Or, hey, you asked for this project. Here's what I worked on with Tam. I'm going to have her set up open office hours to walk you through it. Right? It is a constant feedback loop. I never wonder what's going on over there.
Yeah.
I know what's going on.
Right.
And that's this thing where that people should understand, like, hey, the more you have a checkpoint in a system and you're sharing these insert whatever, the better it is for everybody. But it all goes back to service of like, all right, what is your system? How often, like, what are you building towards? What is your year goal? What is your quarterly or trimesterly? And then how are you breaking that down into months and week checkpoints for your team? And if it's, if you're like, this sounds like a lot, like, yeah, it's a lot. If you only do a annual review, then say, all right, cool. That's a data point. Then have just start with just 12 monthly milestones for people on your team.
Yeah.
And then go.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, right, that's what I would do.
Yeah, for sure. So you said a goal of yours earlier. It was like as little as possible, but
as much as possible. Or so as little as possible, but as much as necessary.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So that's a good metric for anyone who's thinking about looking at their time. Well, let's check in as little as we possibly can, but as much as we need to.
Yeah. Right. And there's also making good use of the time. You want to show up and do a really hard workout for 30 minutes or a half-ass workout for 90 minutes. I mean, your call.
Yeah, right.
And so having detailed agendas and milestones, like that is you are getting a hard-ass workout for your 30 minutes.
Yeah. Right. Let's talk more rock. Huh? Cool. Well, anything you want to circle back on before we jump?
No, I would say that, no, let me circle back to yes. This is a lot. I would say, what is your minimum viable product? Obviously, your company does not run how we do, but you do have linchpin moments. You do have these important data points. And how are you building a system to get there?
Yeah.
It's really important. If you're a runner, what is your training calendar? If you're a, performer, how many times you need to rehearse, just look it through that lens.
Yeah. Awesome. Great stuff. Well, thank you, Stephen. Thanks for listening, everyone. Until next time, be excellent to each other.
Thanks for listening to the Culture Goodr podcast. To submit questions for the podcast, learn more about our culture, and learn how you can status the quote challenge, head over to goodr.com/culture. And don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you're listening, including on YouTube, where you can now watch all of our new episodes. Who knows? You might even catch a glimpse of Carl at our headquarters if he's not already passed out at the tiki bar from all the margaritas.